I'm so excited to have Ben Azadi on with the Carnivore Conversations with Kiltz. And just let me get into welcoming Ben Azadi to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this crazy environment.
Yeah. It's funny because most people accidentally call me Dr. Azadi. And even my mentor sometimes calls me that. I'm like, hey, I'm not a doctor, right? And he's like, my mentor always says, well, it's okay if people make that mistake. You can't make that mistake, though. You don't call yourself a doctor, which I'm not. But I got into this space, Robert, 2007, 14, 15 years ago, when I was 23 years old at the time. I was obese physically. I weighed 250 pounds at that time, 34% body fat. So classified as being physically obese. But not only that, I was mentally obese. I was depressed, suicidal. I had really bad addictive behaviors to video games and toxic relationships and drugs and sugar. And it was just a snowball of negativity around me. And it was because of this decisions I was making in my life. And I remember this time in my life, Robert, because I was really depressed. I was ready to give up. I was exploring ways to actually end my life because I was tired of being depressed and suicidal and crying every day. And every time I explored suicide, and I did many, many times, I kept thinking about my mom. My mom would flash on my mind. And what would your mom have to deal with if you took your life? Was the
Wow.
voice telling me, right? Over and over and over. And that was the only thing that stopped me from taking my life, was my mom. She had no idea, but it was that conversation that was going back and forth. So I had to figure things out because I knew I wasn't going to take my life, but I was tired of being broken, depressed, overweight, obese. My mom worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, by the way. So she brought me like Kentucky Fried Chicken growing up. And as you know, how toxic that is. So everything changed for me the minute that I took responsibility, the second that I took responsibility. But it didn't just come out of nowhere. I started to read books. A friend of mine handed me a book. One book led to 5 books, 5 books led to 20 books. And I read incredible authors like Dr. Wayne Dyer, Bob Proctor, Tony Robbins, Earl Nightingale, these incredible people. And the books opened up a whole new world. But the most important thing that the books did for me is help me take ownership and responsibility for the first time ever. And I believe that's the starting point for all change, because you can't be a victim of your history and be responsible. When you're responsible, you become a victor of your destiny. You're not a victim of your history. And that's what happened to me. I took responsibility, and 9 months later, I lost 80 pounds. I went from 34% body fat to 6% body fat, finally carved out a physical six pack, but most importantly, achieved a mental six pack. And I have been a student ever since. 14 years ago, I got really infatuated with health and nutrition, and I've learned some things along the way. But that was the starting point for me. I had to kind of rise up from being broken and hitting rock bottom.
So being broken is often the start of being fixed. And unfortunately, too many people are committing suicide and are depressed. What was the thing that you mentioned? Your mom, and then some books that people gave to you, and you're obviously spending a lot of time sharing these ideas and the mission of healing. And you're not a doctor, but it seems to me that doctors maybe are spreading the wrong information, and health and wellness is taken to social media, which I call social medicine, which seems to be opening up health and wellness for more people. And I'm a doctor, but I didn't learn this from being a doctor. I learned this from people like yourself out in the world. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration to share these words with others.
Yeah, I love that. Social medicine. Beautiful. I haven't heard that before. Yeah, for me, I believe that not just for me, every human being, we are creators. We were designed by a creator, and we want to create. And either you create or you disintegrate. So if you're not creating, if you're not living a life on purpose with your purpose, if you don't even have goals, don't have a purpose, don't even know what your highest values are, you're going to lose your vital force. You're going to disintegrate. You're going to fill that gap with bad behaviors and dopamine hits. And that was the case for me. When I started to discover my purpose on planet Earth, which was actually, studying nutrition and educating and helping a lot of people who are metabolically challenged, it got me excited to create, and it inspired me. And there's a big difference between being inspired and being motivated. Motivation is something external that motivates you, and that could be okay, but that's short lived. That's why Zig Ziglar used to always say motivation is like taking a shower. We would recommend it every day. That's kind of hard to do. It's not sustainable. Inspiration comes from within. It's when you're clear on your why, your highest values. The Greeks call it your telos, and then you live on purpose with that purpose. So I would recommend finding what is important to you. And how do you even do that? That's a question I get asked. Well, where do you find yourself doing activities where time just flies by? Just, like 1 hour felt like, 1 hour, excuse me, 1 hour felt like it was 5 minutes, right? You just were in a flow state. Where are you excited and energized when you're speaking about a topic? Like, that's where your genius is. That's where you're going to find your purpose. So that was a starting point. And then I started to just align my activities with my highest values, which was studying health and nutrition and mindset and education. And then eventually along the way, my dad got sick, and we could get into that. But it started with getting clear on my why. I believe when your why is strong, the hows become easier for you.
And the inspiration is within, and yet I sense there's that outward inspiration to help others
Yeah.
who are likely suffering from what you suffered from, and helping them not go through the suffering, and ultimately potentially again the diseases that cause us to suicide, or the diseases that work into the modern medical establishment where we're treating a symptom but we don't understand the cause.
It's exactly it. You don't, it's really needless. People are suffering, and they don't have to suffer, right? Depression, suicide, obesity, all the things that we see. It's unnecessary. We weren't born into this world just to go through all this disease. As a matter of fact, I have a completely different perspective and paradigm on disease and symptoms. I see disease and symptoms as a gift from your beautiful innate intelligence showing you something's wrong, like the check engine light that turns on when your engine is malfunctioning. Thank God for that. That is your innate intelligence showing you you're out of homeostasis, something that you've done with your thoughts, with your lifestyle behaviors, with the food you're eating has created a blockage, an interference. And we're showing you these symptoms or this disease to bring you back to homeostasis, which is very different from, as you know, the conventional approach of just let's write you a prescription for that symptom, let's perform a surgery for that disease. Very different approach. So once you identify the interference, you work on removing it, then the innate intelligence, which is this inner physician, could go to work and heal your body.
So finding the resources that provide the inspiration is critical for everyone and anyone. And what tell us a little about your mission and sharing those resources, and how people can find the inner spark to move to change.
Yeah, and it usually comes from a paradigm shift, right? We've heard of that word paradigm, and what that simply means is a multitude of behaviors that are embedded into your subconscious mind, which just means it just goes on autopilot without you actually thinking about it. These are behaviors that you just do every single day, brushing your teeth, putting on your pants, things that are just on autopilot. It's your paradigm. And if your paradigm has led you to a life of poor results with your health and your relationships and your finance, there needs to be a paradigm shift. And from my understanding and research, I've only discovered two ways to change your paradigm. The first way is an emotional impact would be a way to change your paradigm. And an emotional impact 9 times out of 10 is going to be a negative experience. For example, like 9/11, right? In New York City in 2001, September 11th, that was an emotional impact for a lot of people who were involved with 9/11. They lost a loved one or a coworker or whatever it was. That was an emotional impact which changed the way that they thought, changed their thoughts and their behaviors forever. When I lost my dad, it was an emotional impact that changed the way my paradigm forever. So that's one way. Ideally, we don't want to have to suffer to change the paradigm. So the second way would be the constant repetitive repetition of these behavior changes, and it takes some time to change it, but small little tweaks that you make every single day that lead to giant peaks. Little momentum, gain a little bit of momentum, then it snowballs over time. That's the way that I approach it. That's the way that I teach it. So it's about getting small wins every day and beating yesterday and building from there. That's another great way to change that paradigm and change your behavior.
Mentors or an apprenticeship? Maybe you could talk a little bit about your knowledge and or your inspiration to find someone that can help you to that next level.
I do believe in mentors. I think they're so important. And for me, my mentors started off with just books, right? You see all the books behind me. Reading a book is a form of mentorship. You get years of knowledge and experience from that person who wrote the book condensed into something you can read in a few hours in a few days. So it's kind of like decades of learning into days, which is really, really special. So that's one way of mentorship. YouTube University, Audible, these are all great. A step above that would be to actually find somebody who is doing the things that you want to do, and you ask them to teach it to you. You pay them to teach it to you. For example, Dr. Pompa, right? He's my personal mentor. I once saw Dr. Daniel Pompa speak at a conference several years ago in Boca. And I had studied him for years, knew of his work. This is the first time that I ever saw him speak. And in the first hour of watching him speak, I said to myself, I want to know everything he knows and I want him to teach it to me. So I made that decision, and it was one of the greatest decisions. So, yes, find a mentor, find somebody, a coach, somebody who sees greatness in you when you don't see greatness in yourself. My mentors have done that for me over the years, and it's such a beautiful thing. And the second benefit of a mentor is the accountability aspect. I really believe that accountability is that glue that ties your goals to your results. They hold you accountable. They don't call you out, they call you up. So, yes, absolutely. I really believe in mentors and apprenticeships for sure.
So getting that inspiration, do you have any particular books? You mentioned the few books that came to you, and I know that years ago, Man's Search for Meaning, The Alchemist, a few books that really just like and I love reading biographies or autobiographies. And do you have any personal the one book that you'd say, boy, this is the one that I really always go back to or really inspired me the most in my life?
It's a tough question. Those are awesome books that you mentioned. I love those. I'll share the first book that made the change for me. The first book that was handed to me from my friends when I was depressed and suicidal, and then I'll share an author that I always go back to. So the first book was called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, and it's available now. And it simply teaches you what we just spoke about: small behavior changes that you make every day that compound over time. And it really made a lot of sense for me because at that time I was already making these daily decisions, but they were towards unhealthy living and video games. And I was a really good video game player. And I thought, man, if I'm using so much energy and I'm so disciplined in video games, then I could like transfer that to health and nutrition. And I did. It was a transfer of energy. So it taught me about kind of using that energy you're using on bad habits into good things and having that compound over time. So that's a good starting point. It was for me. Now, in terms of something that I go back to over and over and over, it's Bob Proctor, who's this photo behind me. He has actually passed on. He passed away earlier this year, but every day for the last 7 years, I listen to his audiobooks, I read his books, I watch his YouTube videos. So he's somebody that I visit every single day and get mentored by on a daily basis. So Bob Proctor, I call him the Michael Jordan of prosperity teachers.
For so many people, they're finding you on YouTube, and I know that Keto Camp is really big and growing. Tell us a little bit about the mission that you're out there sharing, and how people could find you also.
Yeah, the mission is very similar to your mission, and you're doing such a fantastic job educating so many people with your website. Your Instagram is incredible, and it's the mission is to educate and to inspire 1 billion people. And what I mean by that, and that's billion with the B. And what I mean by that is there's two types of people that I've found in the world. 97% of the population are looking for band-aids. They're symptom chasing, they have microwave thinking. Instead of living 70 years on planet Earth, they live 1 year 70 times. They're unhealthy, they're unhappy, and they don't understand cause and effect. And I was there myself. That's 97% of the population. Then we have the 3 percenters who understand cause and effect. Like Robert, you're a 3 percenter. You teach people to be 3 percenters. You understand that the body is built to heal itself. You understand that it's lifestyle change, not fad diets. You understand hormones and metabolism. You get somebody who's a 3 percenter gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they tell their doctor, actually, your ability to help me is terminal, and they go on to heal themselves. So the mission is to educate. That's 97% of the people out there that are tiptoeing their way through life, hoping to land safely on death's door, and to shake them and rattle them and wake them up and let them know, hey, enough is enough, right? Exactly, Robert. Wake them up and say, if you treat your health casually, you're going to end up a casualty. You're going to be another statistic. Let's wake up, because being unhealthy is not just the most selfish thing you can do in the world for yourself, but you're also depriving your friends and family, your coworkers, and everybody in your life. You're depriving them of your greatest version of yourself. So it's selfish for you to do that. Wake up. Let's take ownership. That's the mission, to do that for 1 billion people on planet Earth.
And why keto? Tell us a little bit about how you got into the keto world, and maybe a little bit carnivore, but tell us a little about your nutritional philosophy and practice.
Yeah, so I mentioned when I lost the weight, it took 9 months. I lost 80 pounds. I was fit, but I wasn't necessarily healthy. I was one of those fit, sick people that we see out there, those fitness pros, right? And I had acne and digestive issues. So I still wanted to explore what real health felt like and looked like, because I looked great on the outside, but not good on the inside. So I explored the vegan diet, God forbid. But
Explorations are good.
exploration is good, but not when you're dogmatic about it. And I was actually very dogmatic back in 2012 when I first did the vegan diet for 15 months, Robert. And you could
Wow.
imagine what that did to my health. In the first few weeks, I felt better, but then you hit that vegan wall, and then it's just like boom, hormetic curve drops. So I stuck with it though, because I was dogmatic. But eventually, 15 months into it, I realized this is not serving me. Like, I felt awful. I was sore from my workouts for days. My mitochondria was not adapting well. So I did some blood work and verified how I felt. And I said, all right, done with the vegan diet. And then this led into the year 2013. And that's where I discovered the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting kind of hand in hand. I started to get into the work of Dave Asprey, Mercola, Dr. Pompa, my mentor now, and a few others. And I was really fascinated by these ancient healing strategies, and carnivore is included into that, but it was years later until I got into carnivore. So, ketosis, our ancestors, they all did ketosis. There's nothing new about it. It's actually the reason we exist today. Thank God for ketosis, because if our ancestors didn't have the ability to burn fat and send ketones to the brain, they would be idiots and not survive, and they would have died, and we wouldn't exist. So thank God. So I implemented a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting. And at this time I was owning a CrossFit gym here in Miami. And it was so cool to kind of see my workouts improve, my energy improve, my hormones improve. And I fell in love with it. And that's where I just really dove into keto and intermittent fasting, 2013, 2014. And I learned a lot of things along the way, but that was the starting point for me.
So tell us about the camp and the educational institute that you're really spearheading.
Yeah, so Keto Kamp, and it's camp with the K for those wondering.
Yes.
Keto Kamp is my company. It's my brand. And we have, of course, educational content for free, just like you, on our social media platforms, YouTube, the Keto Kamp podcast, which Robert's coming on soon, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And then I have books. I have 4 books that I've written. The last one was called Keto Flex, and it's all about this metabolic flexibility approach. And then we have, of course, courses, right? The Keto Kamp Academy, where it's an online membership. We have members from all over the world. And I've put all that I've learned into a step-by-step system in video content with instructions, along with group coaching. I have 3 health coaches that work with me and work with the members. So, that the goal is to give them the structure, the system, and then have the coaches hold them accountable. And I love it. I'm excited about it. I'm always thinking about ways to add more value to that. And it's just fun. As you know, it's so much fun to create content, to make a big difference and put a dent in disease.
The dent is a huge crater.
Yeah, I
It's
love it.
huge.
Yeah.
It is huge. And again, Dr. Google has always been the nemesis of all of us doctors. Okay.
Yes.
And patients would come in with all these lists of things, and we go like, come on, well, I'm a doctor. Are you a doctor? And over the years, for me, 15 years ago ish, a little more, I learned about paleo diet. And I'm like, okay, what is paleo diet? Right. And then I started reading about paleo, and then I tripped over keto. And then for almost 12 years now, I've been carnivore, but I can't be quiet about it, because it doesn't require a drug very frequently, or it doesn't require a dissection, and it doesn't require an MD. And
Mm.
that's the amazing part to this journey. And essentially, the world of keto carnivore inspiration online is sort of trumping the standard medical community. What's your thoughts on how to inspire the doctors and the medical profession to maybe open the window and take a listen and a look?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. We live in a day and age which is interesting because now the people who are online watching your Instagram videos, your reels, listening to your podcast, they know more about nutrition and metabolic health than that doctor they're meeting with their appointment, right? It's so interesting. So they're actually educating their doctors. And if you're, what would I tell those doctors? Look at what you're seeing in front of you. You have these patients who are doing keto, doing carnivore, doing intermittent fasting, and you're seeing all these improvements with their labs and the way they look. Like it's hard to deny that. Like really dig into that. Like see what's working for them, and instead of saying, I don't know how they're doing that, or this is a miracle. There must be doing some sort of a supplement, whatever it is. Like look at what's in front of you, and look at the research. Look at what's out there. There's a lot of research. As you know, just go on PubMed and type in keto and whatever condition or intermittent
Right.
fasting or whatever it is. And the research is there. It's just that, as you know, they don't have enough time. They're overwhelmed. So it's a tough one. But for those who are actually taking ownership and responsibility and educating yourself, like kudos to you. That's what it takes. You got to take responsibility, take it out of the hands of anybody else and put it into your own hands. And podcasts like this, it's so important because it gives people who are hopeless hope and inspires them to do their own research.
And hope is critical and faith is important, but knowledge is the real power. And via books and podcasts and so many different ways to learn, which there's more information on the internet uh, than I had going to medical school, and I paid a lot of money to get the information. That's the amazing part of the story. Ultimately, there's only really one doctor in the house, and that's yourself. And maybe that's the challenge. The change here is that the community, the individual is empowered with something that they've never had before, and you can't hide it anymore.
That's it. Yeah, and you're right. It's a crater in disease, and there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies and big pharma do not like the message we're having here, the conversation we're having here, because there's no money to be made from it. I mean, if you could put the benefits of fasting into a pill, you know how much money they would make from that thing, but you can't. They actually lose money. So it goes against the grain of what they're doing. No pun intended.
So, can you tell us a little bit about fasting and your general take on fasting and conversation with your community?
I love fasting. It's another ancient healing strategy. It's been around forever. Of course, there's not one cookie cutter approach to fasting. It's a stressor to the body. So somebody needs to first make sure they're mastering their stress. Of course, you got to make sure you're getting good sleep and you're not overwhelmed by work. Because if you are so stressed and your mitochondria are in this cell danger response, and then you add a stress to it like fasting, that's not a good idea. You're not going to be able to adapt to that. So once you add fasting in the right way and build up to some good different fasting strategies, it's so great. It's like nature's reset button. You allow your digestive system to take a break. You allow the brain to be flooded with BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. You allow this autophagy process and stem cells and apoptosis. I feel incredible when I'm fasted. But here's the thing. I'm guilty of this. You feel so good when you're fasted, and autophagy is so beneficial, but too much of a good thing will be a bad thing. You got to balance it out. And the opposite of fasting and autophagy is the anabolic and building and mTOR. So mTOR is great in spurts. Autophagy and fasting is great in spurts, but the magic is in that seesaw dance of mTOR and autophagy. So you got to find that good balance there. Somebody who's obese and metabolically challenged, they need more autophagy, more fasting versus somebody who's lean and trying to build muscle. So I love fasting for many, many reasons. I've done a 5-day water fast. I experiment with 24-hour fast all the time, but it's a tool. Like all tools, you got to know how to use the tool. Otherwise that tool could hurt you.
Do you have a consistent daily habit or weekly habits what's something that you would say, hey, this is a really good habit to stick to, which could really meld into many people's health and wellness plan?
Perfect question. I would say this: whatever your fasting schedule is, whatever diet you follow, this will apply to anybody, and that is give yourself at least 5 hours of digestion before going to bed. Right. So if you go to bed at 11, your last meal should be done by 6 p.m. 5 hours of digestion before bed. If you do that most nights and you track things like your HRV and your sleep, your deep and all that, you're going to see all of these numbers improve. You're going to get more weight loss, down regulation of inflammation, because when you eat too close to bed, we could agree, Robert, it's just not a good idea. You're going to take energy away from all the amazing processes as you go to sleep, the lymphatic system, delta sleep, REM sleep, and you're going to use that for digestion. And it's going to lower your HRV, your heart rate variability. It's going to increase your resting heart rate. You're going to wake up feeling groggy. So I would say the one thing I would recommend, 5 hours of fasting before bed, and just doing that most days out of the week, you'll see a big positive change.
And how about number of meals a day? And what about breakfast, lunch, and those sort of things? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. If you would have asked me that question like 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said that breakfast is the stupidest meal of the day. Skip it and have lunch and dinner. And the reason I won't say that today is because there's a lot of compelling research on early time restricted feeding that has changed my mind, showing that it's actually beneficial to have breakfast and lunch and skip dinner, which actually goes aligned with what I just recommended with the fasting. As a matter of fact, there's a study that came out from the Alabama Birmingham, Dr. Courtney Peterson, Professor Peterson, who all she did, and she controlled the whole study. It was in a lab. She measured the SIRT1 gene, as you know, is the longevity gene, protects your telomeres, etc. And she measured autophagy via the LC3A protein gene in the lab. So she measured autophagy and SIRT1 and other metrics. All she changed, same food, isocaloric. All that was different was that one group had breakfast and lunch. So they ate at 8 a.m. and they were done eating by 2 p.m. And the other group had lunch and dinner. So they skipped breakfast, had lunch, and ate a little bit later. And after 4 days, the group that had the early meal, the early time restricted feeding, after just 4 days, there was a 10% increase in that SIRT1 gene and 22% more autophagy after 4 days, right? And there's other research. So that would be my recommendation. Eat most of your calories earlier on in the day.
Well, you know, we're always shifting and changing and throwing opposite ideas, and that's really important to see, because I can tell you that I'm like the one meal a day at night, and that's been my best, but I haven't gone back to trying my breakfast and an early lunch or and like that. So I'm open. I'll
Yeah.
give it a shot. I'll give it a shot because ultimately, it's one of those things in medicine and science. We often, again, we judge before we experiment.
You're right. Good point. I love that. And it should be the opposite way, right? We should
Right,
experiment
right,
and then
right.
make it. Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it and give it a shot. I'm on my 2-day fast right now.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
and I do usually a 3-day fast once a month, a 2-day fast once a week. And I typically do 23 and 1. That's kind of where I found my sweet spot. But I mostly went carnivore and I went to my one meal a day. So I haven't mixed it up a little bit. And that might be a little bit of play on Kiltz's side.
Yeah, I would be curious to see how it goes. Maybe when I interview you, you could give me an update on how that goes. Look, I prefer to skip breakfast. Even knowing some of the research that's coming out there, I still tend to skip breakfast just because I feel so much better skipping breakfast. But I have been throwing in breakfast 2 to 3 times a week and changing things up. And every time I do, I'll look at my HRV and my sleep scores, and it's always improved on the day. It's always better on the days that I'm having breakfast and skipping dinner for myself personally.
Well, Sunday, I do feast a little bit more, and I tend to make some really great bacon and eggs in the morning,
Mm,
or maybe about 10 o'clock. And but on Sundays, I quite often have a 4 o'clock meal for my dinner, and so it's one of my best days of the week. And
interesting.
and so again, it's always mixing it up and learning new things. And what about journaling and keeping sort of details of what how you're feeling? Because I know I ask people like what they eat last week, they can't remember, or how did they feel? What's your thoughts on keeping a record? That's kind of fun. You want to make it fun too, right?
Yeah, yeah, you want to make it fun. So I see that being valuable for some people, and I see people seeing that as like a chore, and actually, them actually giving up on the protocol. So I think it's going to be know the person. I do see the value in it though, because you're right. Somebody writes down what they ate and they kind of give themselves a score that day of like their energy and vitality and just how they felt. And they could kind of look at what they ate, their patterns, and then the score. And then let's say it was a good score, they felt really good. They could, kind of duplicate that and then have it. Maybe there's a day where they scored low and they changed up their routine. Maybe they had a later dinner or whatever. They could see that and say, oh, that's probably the reason why I didn't feel so good. So I see the value in it for sure. It's just that some people are going to look at that as like a chore. So I think it's going to be really personable to that individual.
Mindset, faith, food, or fitness. Would you put it as a hierarchy where you think is the most important thing, what you put in the mind, the mouth, or the motion of the body?
Damn, that's a tough question.
Well, we got to pin you down on something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would put faith and mindset in the same category. So
Right.
if you allow me to do that, I would say that would be the first thing. So if faith is in the mindset category, I would say this: 95% of your results in life, your success, is from mindset. 5% strategy, right? Strategy needs to be really good, but so mindset number one, it's foundational, and then what was it? Nutrition, and then fitness would be after that.
And how often do you practice your fitness routine? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing today at 25.
38. Yeah. Thank you. um, yeah. So it's different now than what it was when I was 25. I did CrossFit for many years and I would like really just bang up my body. Now I'm more smart. So I do something 6 days out of the week, some form of workout or exercise 6 times out of the week. So every Sunday I'll play basketball at the park here in Miami Beach, outdoors, 2 to 3 hours, fasted basketball. Really, I love basketball. And then 3 times out of the week, I'm doing some sort of strength training, 30 minutes, 40 minutes max, nothing more than that in the gym here in my building. And then two times additional to outside of that, cardio, recovery, stretching, foam rolling sort of thing. So 6 times out of the week, I'm doing some sort of activity, exercise, workout, whatever you want to call it. But every day I'm getting at least 10,000 steps, some days 15K, sometimes 18K. But that's kind of my general flow of it right now.
And I pretty much stopped exercise about 10, 12 years ago. And I felt great for a long time, but because I was beating myself up in so much exercise, and I really consider excessive exercise is the real harm. And now I'm sort of focused on light riding, light rowing, light motion, and then resistance work, which I think is really important because doing nothing is one extreme and doing everything is the other extreme. So we've got to find that middle ground for each person that gives them the best motivation.
I agree. I love what you're doing. I think that's great. It doesn't take a lot of time, really doesn't, right? 3 times a week, 30 minutes max each time of some sort of strength training exercise you enjoy. Like just that right there is enough to get some benefit, a lot of benefits.
And tell us a little bit about, because everyone wants to know, what does Ben Azadi eat? What's your general shopping list or eating list?
Well, I'm mostly carnivore. So you're gonna like that. I do really well with meat. I feel really good with meat. I'm not 100% carnivore, but 90% is of my plate is meat usually. But I'll share my story. I think you're gonna like this of my first carnivore experiment, because this was about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was looking at all of these videos and research, like anecdotal evidence of people who are doing carnivore and their psoriasis went away, their autoimmune got better. And I interviewed Paul Saladino a few years ago, and I was really fascinated by it. And I wanted to teach it to my students, but I think you're the same way. In order to teach it, I need to do it first. I need to experiment with it. So I didn't judge it. I thought it was interesting, but I wanted to see what it would do for me. So I decided to do a 40-day experiment where I'm going to do carnivore for 40 days, but I'm also going to do extensive lab work on day 1 and the same set of lab work on day 40. And I'm going to pay attention to how I feel. I have Raynaud's, which is autoimmune. I'm going to see what it does for my Raynaud's. And you have it too?
I haven't
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. And I
had
want
it.
to,
Had it. It's way less frequent. And I live in upstate New York where it's
yeah.
cold.
Yeah. Ooh, I want to hear more about what you've been doing for that. So, yeah. And so, okay, I went and I did lab work. I did HSCRP, homocysteine, fibrinogen, fasting insulin, thyroid panel, lipid panel, all these markers. It was like $3,500 worth retail. And then I did 40 days of carnivore. It's nothing but animal fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, all the stuff that are bad words to people's doctors. And I felt great, first of all. Took me about 3 or 4 days to kind of adapt to that, meaning I was doing some workouts and I was kind of low energy. And then after 3 or 4 days, I kind of pushed through that and then amazing energy. So that was a little bit of a transition really quick, but I felt great. My brain was just like super focused. I was so creative. I was doing interviews. I felt so good. My skin started to improve and get clear. My digest, no bloating, no gas. Not that I always had gas, but it would come sometimes, but none of that. My fiance was happy about that. Body fat started to decrease. I started to see more like definition. And then the thing with my Raynaud's, um, my Raynaud's has gotten a lot better over the years, even up until this point where I was not getting a lot of flare ups. I was actually getting the opposite of Raynaud's, and I forget the condition, but it's when your fingers get very hot and inflamed. Yeah, do you get that too?
No, but I was just listening to someone who was talking about that just today, actually.
Interesting. So I have both. It's funny because it's like the opposite, where you get cold and the blood flow goes away, and then you get. So when I would eat, my fingers would get really hot and inflamed and swollen. I would take off my ring because it would hurt. And this was happening prior to this experiment, pretty much every day. And then I did the 40 days of carnivore, and throughout the 40 days, that only happened twice.
Wow. Wow.
And it was happening every day prior to that. And I'm like, wow, this is interesting. And then I did the lab work on day 40 and all of my markers improved. My C-reactive protein went from 1.1 on day 1 to 0.5, which flies in the face, as you know, of conventional wisdom of saturated fat causing heart attacks. Homocysteine got better. A1C dropped a point. Fasting insulin got better. So all these things improved. So that was my like, whoa, there's something here. And for me now, I don't do it 100% all the time like you do it, but I'll do 40 days in a row, 3 to 4 times a year. But most of the time when I eat, it's mostly carnivore. That's what I do.
I'm 95 to 98% because I do love my duck fried French fries,
Mm.
dipped in sour cream and duck grease mayonnaise
Oh my
with
gosh.
Alden salt from time to time. And because we live in the world and we can find the rigidity of it, or we can find some way to sort of swim and move through it. Because I think, again, I'm a carnivore, you're a carnivore, but we find that we can consume some other things because we've healed so well from being on carnivore and fasting and mindset. Would you agree with that?
I agree. It's I am all about flexibility. I'm all about it. I don't like rigidity of the membranes. I don't like rigidity of the mentality of rigidity of the mental rigidity. So yes, you do the work and then you kind of earn the badge to have some things. So you're more carnivore than I am. I'll have gelato sometimes. I'll even have some vegetables, God forbid, sometimes. But if I see myself regressing, then I'll be more disciplined. But as long as I continue to feel good and markers look good, I could add some things in. But most of the time, I feel really good with meat. I just know my body loves meat.
You haven't tried Kiltz's carnivore ice cream yet.
No, I actually did at
Well,
the
that's
Keto
right.
Symposium. Yeah, yeah.
Right. That's
It's
right.
fantastic. Yeah.
And so, it's life is not to be you got to reward and treat yourself, but not punish yourself. And again, when we do these things, the negative thoughts about, oh, I should have never done that, has some mindset issues that then create a little bit of depression. And then what do we want to do when we're anxious, depressed? Eat sugar,
Yeah.
right? Right? Do something that's not good for us of any significance. Now, I'm off coffee now for 4 months. Again, I've just any thoughts on coffee, tea, and those sort of things?
Man, congratulations, because that's something I've been wanting to do for a while to break away from
I
coffee.
did it at 66, so you got a little time.
I love my cup of coffee every morning. I really do. Of course, it's clean coffee, heavy metal free, mold free, all that good stuff. It's part of my routine. But when there's a dependency on it, that's the problem. So, thoughts on coffee? Coffee could be great, beneficial if it's a clean source and you use it cyclically, but also detrimental if you're buying moldy coffee and you're addicted to it. So kudos to you. More power to
Well,
you.
well, I think, yeah, I maybe didn't understand the addiction quite as much because I was drinking it probably too much, too often, and I didn't focus on those other points of mold free and toxin free either. So I think I'm going to get back to it, following those things, but recognizing it, just like I have a little bit of a martini, extra filthy dirty, way infrequently. Coffee, I think, again, it's not the cause of most of our diseases,
No, no, not at all.
right?
There's actually so many benefits to coffee.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of the problem is chronic use of it, right? But when you're using it the way you're doing it, 4 months off, whatever time you get back on, that's going to be beneficial. I believe it'll actually be beneficial to you.
I agree. What about cream? Because I add cream or butter to coffee. Any thoughts on those types of fats and how people do on milk products?
Yeah, well, it's estimated that 75% of adults can't process pasteurized dairy, but heavy cream is a little bit different. It's mostly milk fat, even if it's pasteurized. So I'm okay with heavy cream. I put raw heavy cream in my coffee. So I'm okay with that. And butter, grass-fed butter, ghee, all that's fine. But I'm a more of a heavy cream guy myself with a little bit of some uh, maybe like C8 MCT powder and some sea salt. That's usually what I put in my coffee.
Salt. We're reading this week's book is Salt Fix.
Oh, nice. Yeah, great book.
A great book, and one of the things interesting is salt fixes what sugar harms.
Mm.
And it's sort of this really interesting what Dr. D is let's see, I've got to read it, D Nicolantonio.
There you
That's
go. I
that's
just call him Dr. James. It's easier.
Dr. James or Dr. D. You're right. But thoughts on, maybe you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on salt and how
Yeah.
you use it or you recommend it.
Yeah, if somebody's new to carnivore or keto, let's say they're transitioning away from a standard American diet, which is about 300 grams of carbs per day, to either keto, which is under 50 grams of carbs per day, or carnivore, which is essentially around 0 grams of carbs per day. Salt's very important because, as you know, Doc, as you drop insulin, you release excess water weight, which is a good thing because insulin causes you to store a lot of water. So as you lower insulin because you're lowering carbs, you're gonna release all this excess water weight. You're gonna feel lighter, look lighter, 2 thumbs up. But then you also have this diuresis process where the kidneys are also releasing electrolytes, and it's one of the most common reason why somebody experiences this keto flu, which is really more of like a carbohydrate issue, not a keto issue. So salt in the beginning, especially to replenish those electrolytes to prevent any symptoms as you make the transition, is important. So I always tell my members about something I call the Keto Kamp cocktail, which is 16 ounces of water, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, a couple pinches of real salt, and a couple pinches of cream of tartar for potassium to replenish those electrolytes. So I think salt is very important. And that book, is probably the perfect book to learn about salt.
Where can people find you? What's the best place they can get a lot of this information and knowledge so they can build and Keto Kamp Academy?
Yeah. Thank you. It's my website's probably best. So benazadi.com has my programs, my books, my podcast, Keto Kamp podcast, which Dr. Robert's going to be on very, very soon. But the website has everything put together for you. And if you want to reach out via contact form, that would be the place.
What's been the biggest challenge for you in this transition? I call it transition. You're obviously not transitioning, you're there. But even in the space, what's your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge in the space in regards to like reaching people, or just in general, what are my biggest challenges right now?
Yeah, I think maybe just, but reaching people and all just challenges right now that you're going through, because we all have a personal life, and I always say there's no real separation between personal and work and business. It's all molded into who we are, and maybe you could talk a little bit about those things.
My personal challenge right now is not saying no enough. uh, so the power of saying no, right? So I'm feeling over the last few months that there's another book I want to write. There's more YouTube videos I want to create and do. I want to get into some like deep work, but then I look at my calendar and it's like, oh, I have this lined up, that lined up, and I just said yes to so many things, and then kind of takes me away from my genius. And not that I don't love those things, but I have a passion now that where I want to dive deep into something. So my biggest challenge is setting the boundaries to really fine tune my schedule, say no to things so I could say yes to the things I'm really passionate about right now.
Yes, not now though.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Later.
Yes, later, later. And you're getting married, or you did get married? I can't
We're
remember.
engaged. We're set to get married next year. We don't have a specific date, but yeah, we're engaged.
That's really exciting thing, and relationships are so critical. How do people deal with relationship differences in carnivore, keto, or standard? My partner is not in the keto carnivore space, and so tell us a little. For me, it's like you just it's we're all different people. That's the beauty of us,
Yeah.
and you gotta honor the vegan, vegetarians, Mediterraneans, pescatarians, and carnivarians because we're all on the journey. We were all there, and when you talk about the fact that we're sort of we believe what we believe, and we're gonna share it with the world, and yet we change.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. You know, and my fiance is also not carnivore. As a matter of fact, when I was first doing one of my carnivore experiments, she was like, I'm gonna do it with you. Just 7 days, 7 days. So I'm like, all right, let's see how it goes for you. 2 days into it, she's like, I'm so bored. I'm tired of eating meat. And she was just complaining. I'm like, just break it already. Just don't go the 7 days. You're driving me nuts. So she broke it. And she does more paleo, I guess. So that's fine. And you know, in the beginning, it would frustrate me, but I soon realized that I don't want to be the tugboat. I want to be the lighthouse. So, you know, I'll do the things that I can do and inspire her, and she'll ask questions and maybe she'll do some things. But same thing, my partner eats more carbs than I do, and she's not keto or she does intermittent fasting, but she's not carnivore. And that's okay. That's her journey, where she's at, like you said. And I'm going to just keep doing me. And it's all, you know, that's her awareness. This is my awareness, and it's all part of it. It's all good.
And it's all part of relationship and marriage too.
Yeah.
These ideas that, we're working to change, but we're really just working to change ourselves and honor and respect everyone else's belief systems in a way that we can all evolve together in this.
Amen. Amen. Exactly.
So what's the do you have books you want to put out there more? You want to get some video ideas out there? What's sort of that next again, it's later, but on the board. What's the whiteboard?
I love to speak. Um, I want to do more speaking. I love it. My favorite thing to do is to speak. You know, time flies when I speak. I get in my flow state. So what's on that for me is speaking on more stages in front of more people, connecting with them in person. So I want to do more of that.
Well, I can tell you from someone who has the honor of listening to you speak was so inspiring and enthralling. That hour was like 5 minutes, and you wanted to keep going. And so I'm inspired to recommend more people check out Ben Azadi and Keto Camp Academy because it's so important. Now, Bob Proctor, because I've read Bob, listened to Bob,
Oh,
and but really you're inspired by people who share and have the vibrational energy to inspire others.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert. First of all, I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was so cool to see you there. And yeah, Bob Proctor, you know, your vibe attracts your tribe, and we're all putting out some sort of vibration. So those 60,000 thoughts you have every single day, become aware of them, because you are the most influential person you'll speak to today. So have a really great conversation and you'll attract really great people in your life.
Yeah, casual or casualty,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And got some and the slight edge we're going to put out there. And are we fit or are we sick or are we sort of fit and sick? Which
Mhm.
I learned from some of my a best friend who died of cancer at 52, who's a healthy doctor, and I realized after that there's something we've got wrong in Western medicine and the world of medicine. Even some of the ancient medical ways can be adjusted in all this. And
Yeah.
so, Ben, it's the most greatest pleasure to learn from you. And our tribe is your tribe, and we're all learning together. And we're all the same around the globe, wouldn't you say?
Amen, brother. We are. We are. And I'm a big fan of your work, Robert. So it's been an honor to be on your podcast. And I can't wait to bring you on my podcast and get into your story and have you educate my audience. And we are all the same. We want to love, we want to be loved, we want to create, we want to give, and we want to be healthy and happy. And we could
Absolutely.
all do that. Our abundance is our birthright. It absolutely is.
And we have to take the baton ourselves and change our mindset to be inspired. And uh, Bob Proctor and many of the other people that you read. Is there a reading list on your site of some of the books that you recommend?
Not right now. I had something set up on this website that somehow got erased, but I got to do something else. So Bob Proctor is definitely my go-to. And then I would say second after Bob would be Dr. Wayne Dyer. I listen to him a lot as well.
I've got his books here. He was one of my
Oh,
favorites. Absolutely.
so
Uh,
good.
a simple snapshot of your books on your shelf would be a real good one because I think many people would love to know what you're reading and what inspires you. So
I'm inspired. Now I'm gonna create that guide again. I'm gonna put out a reading list. Do you do a book club with your group? Because you said you're
we
reading the Self Fix.
we are doing a weekly book through the Mighty Tribe. I do a 5 a.m. every day, and we just throw out a book again. It's Audible. You read it. Salt Fixes this week. Um, Boy, we just have so many. We're working on the list to make sure it's there. In some of the books that I do, I have a book list in the back of them in my keto and my carnivore and on my website. Just the books that have inspired me, like those that have inspired you, because I think that's the first place that I learned your reading is critical. And I grew up dyslexic, couldn't read, didn't
Wow.
love to read. So I was in trouble when I started medical school, or when I learned what it took to be a doctor, I said, I'm in trouble. And yet I worked diligently, persistently, and didn't give up. I do a lot of audiobooks,
Me
but
too. Yeah.
but I've certainly I read, and I can tell you through carnivore, my reading is better, or keto is better. But like anything else, the mindset was it. I heard, oh, I'm dyslexic, I can't read. And so I lived it until I had to do it in order to get to where I wanted to go. And that was the real game changer.
It's beautiful. Yeah, that's incredible. I love it. I love your commitment. It's special. And I'm just looking at your website here. I see all the books. This is great. I'm going to do something like this on my website too.
Well, and we'll co-share. Love to do that. One final point. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you love to make sure you share with the community before we sign off?
Yeah. The last thing I would leave for your audience, not necessarily that you'd haven't asked me. You did a great, incredible job with the interview, but I would add this to the conversation. I would recommend that every single person listening or watching takes a supplement every single day. And this supplement is a specific supplement. It's called vitamin G. And this vitamin has been shown to be anti-inflammatory. It's been shown, according to Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has done brain scans on people who have taken vitamin G, and he observed what happened in their body and brain right after. He saw 1,200 chemical reactions take place instantaneously to flood the body full of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, GABA, and all these amazing neurotransmitters when they took vitamin G. And vitamin G is gratitude, the practice of gratitude. You can't buy it online. You practice it, you get it right now. It's free. but it's a universal law. What you feed energy to expands, right? So I would recommend everything we spoke about today is terrific. Add in the vitamin G, do it before bed, do it in the morning, get your daily dose. You can't overdose on it. It's anti-inflammatory, and you notice a benefit almost immediately.
My gratitude to you for that one, because that is so important. And I do about 3 meditations and prayers a day, and it's always going down the list of the gratitude for so many people. And so my
Ah,
gratitude to you, Ben Azadi. We really appreciate you sharing today, and we look forward to continuing sharing and inspiration.
thank you, Doc. Vitamin G freed too. Thank you so much for
Vitamin
today.
G. All right, we'll talk soon. I look forward to coming on. And again, anything I can do, you've got my number. I
I do.
appreciate
Yeah.
you. And
You're kicking butt, by the way, and your Instagram's doing really well. I love your content, your reels. Like, keep doing it. You're awesome, bro. It's so much fun to watch you grow.
well, having fun doing it. And again, when people again they're either pregnant or their diseases go away, and I look forward to sharing some of the things that I've suffered from that have just melted away. It's been quite amazing.
Amazing. I can't wait to bring you on my podcast and talk all about your work for my audience.
Well, it's the best. All right, God bless you. We'll
God
talk.
bless you. Talk
All
to you
right,
soon.
thanks,
Bye.
man. Bye bye.